Hi, good morning everyone and welcome to the Probe Audit and ISO 315 FAQ. So today on the call with me, we have myself, Christian Stein, as Product Manager of Assurance, and then we also have Christine Rousseau as our independent consultant on the audit side. So please, if I can just do a sound check with everyone, you are welcome to post your questions into the question panes. Or raise your hands, please, if you can, if you can hear me. Okay, so it seems like most of you can hear us. There was a bit of an echo. That should now be sorted. Perfect. Okay, so what we'll be doing today is we have asked you for a few questions on Probe. We've also looked at our support cases to see where we have had questions with regards to the Probe audit release. So it's not a brand new release. We received some questions to ask, is it a new release? It's not a new release. It is for version 2022.20.13. So that was what we released last year in terms of ISO 315. You guys are muted. If you do have any questions, please add them to the questions box and not the chat box. We'll be monitoring the questions pane to see if there's any questions. And then lastly, the session is being recorded and the recording will be posted on our YouTube page. If you don't yet follow us, please go and follow us at Caseware-Africa, and then you'll be able to see the recording. Okay, perfect. So as I mentioned, we're looking at Probe Audit today. Probe Audit forms part of the Assurance suite of products. And within the Assurance suite of products, we are looking at the Probe Audit side. In the chat box, I've already added some available resources for you. So important to note the available resources that we have, your release notes, which will guide you through what has changed in the release, the audit manual. So that's the updated audit manual explaining the methodology to you. That is on the community. Remember, you need to be logged in to have access and licensed to have access to that. So if you want to get access to the new audit manual, you can go and download that there. We've got the ISO mapping document that shows you how the content relates from the standards into the product and where the different areas are mapped to. The cheat sheet, so with the numbers that changed, where you actually can see what the new document numbers is. And then the recording of the roadshow, which you and I did when we went around the country last year to explain to you, as we saw the momentous trend and some other changes that happened there. So if you haven't watched that, that is also available on the YouTube page. All of those links are in the chat, so you can copy and paste those. Okay, so we introduced the Momentous 10 last year, and we're not going to go into detail of all of them again. We will touch on some of those that have frequently asked questions, but just as a reminder, it was quite a significant release for us. And in terms of that, big changes to the audit methodology we have made. It is the biggest release since I want to say Probe was released. So we can see from the screen that there was quite a few changes already in terms of the sections, the scalability of the audit. The look and feel is different. So when you're now doing audits, make sure that you're working with the new template. You'll immediately see when it's different. Document 1051 works a bit different. Brand new document 1055. In terms of controls, a few changes. Your risk of material misstatement, the assertions, which we'll go through a bit more detail, as well as the work program procedures, and a brand new concept called TRAP, which is transactions relating to account balances. So in terms of support and top 5 questions we received within support is, first of all, we released a hotfix, and most of you are asking, but what is a hotfix? Then document 1110, the risk of material misstatement not pulling through when you've performed a year-end close. Some of you are calling in to say your probe documents are blank, activating licensing and registrations, and then amounts not pulling through. So we'll look at those in detail, and then we have a few other FAQs that we will look at as well. So the first question coming up, what is a hotfix? So Probe has had the concept of a hotfix for quite a few years, but in general, we only release maybe a hotfix once a year. With the extent of the release this year, we plan to release a hotfix almost every 2 weeks, just so that we can quickly respond to any changes and fixes that we need to make. So we've made all of the changes, we've gone through a testing process, we did alpha testing, we did beta testing with some of you on the call, and once the product with this amount of changes actually hits the ground running and you start doing some audits, there could be some things that has been unforeseen. And what we didn't want to happen is have you end up in a situation where you can't continue with the audit. So we then decided that we will release a hotfix as and when required, but ideally every 2 weeks, so that you can then run that and that would fix any critical bugs. So hotfix is not used to release new software. It is only used to release fixes to the product. So it's quick, immediate fixes. So the hotfixes are rolled out to fix bugs immediately without waiting for the next full release. So we're not doing a new full release, we're not doing a patch. We will continue with the hotfixes as it is needed. It is for high severity cases. So it's only when there's a critical bug, and a critical bug means for us it's something that impacts compliance, or it's you can't do anything. So it's the user don't have a workaround, you can't make any changes. It then allows for improved usability. So as I said, when the fix is applied, the template becomes usable again, and you continue with the template without having to reinstall it. So we didn't want firm templates to then be an issue. Okay, so I see some of you, in terms of the questions, are still mentioning that you don't have sound. Let's quickly just see in terms of the sound check. Just going to start and lower everyone's hands. Okay, if you could maybe just in the questions pane confirm for me. Okay, so I see able to, yeah, okay. So let's continue. I think if you're having sound issues, just log in with the desktop app and maybe or try a different browser. Seems like most people are responding to say that they do have, they can hear us. Okay, perfect. So let's continue. And then lastly, in terms of a hotfix, the recoverability. So you can run a hotfix on an engagement file. So what we did not want to do is to release a new template. Then you have to do a new firm template and go through the tests for that firm template author the template, repackage it, and then send it out to everyone, and then update your engagement file. So hotfix can be run on the engagement file. What is important is when we're designing a hotfix, we try to keep as much information as possible. So when we're running the hotfix, the development team really tries not to touch any of the information that is already documented within that specific document. But unfortunately, sometimes we do need to clear a certain cell if it's writing to the wrong value, or if there's duplication of information writing to the same CV database, then you might lose some information. So after you run a hotfix, please just review the document, make a backup before you run the hotfix, review the document after you've run the hotfix, so that you can be sure that you did not lose any information within that engagement file. And also in terms of the hotfix, we have structured it in such a way that it is per document. So you know that we are fixing one document at a time, and actually which document we have fixed that you can then go and review. So I hope that answers the question around the hotfix and why we decided to do a hotfix rather than a full template. So how do we develop a template or a hotfix and prepare for it? So first of all, we gather the details about the bug. Now, this is an important one for us because we do rely on you to report these items to support. So we go through the support log, we see the issues, they get escalated to development, and we then go through those to decide which are critical bugs. We then plan to address the bug, we then test it, fix it, and then we release it to you. So in terms of releasing it to you, there's a few ways that you can get notified about a hotfix. So the first one is to check your notifications. We are not sending out emails for every single hotfix we release, but what we do is we update the notification manager. So in the notification manager, you will get a notification to say there's a new notification available. Once you open the notification, you will see if there is a new hotfix, and that will then take you to the hotfix page. What you can also do as a second option is within any Probe document, you can click on Probe Help and then Update from Hotfix. That will take you to the hotfix page, and you would then be notified about the hotfix. Or you could also just check the success.casewareafrica.com community and look at the hotfix page. Within that page, you will then be notified of all the changes. So for those of you who are not aware about the of the notification manager, so within Caseware Working Papers, we do have the notification manager, which is the little bell. And if I then just click on the bell, I can see that there's currently one notification available for me. So there you can see there's the notification, there's one. It does relate to Probe. And then you can also click to get more details. So the moment I click there, it will then open the hotfix page for me, and you can read more about the Probe hotfix. Previously, you had to be logged in to download the hotfix. Now you can just click to download the latest hotfix. That will then download the install file. Once you have the install file downloaded, there's also the install instructions with the process. So you would basically run the hotfix. It will save it to your document library folder. You drag and drop the document into the engagement file, and then you apply the hotfix. We also provide details of the different hotfixes, when it was released, and when you then report that the hotfix to us or the bug to us, we normally give you a number, so you would be able to follow the number as it was escalated to us. So you would be able to see that. So we're proactively monitoring the support cases together with hotfixes. And then once you have the hotfix document copied in, you would then open the hotfix. You have a choice to apply all of the hotfixes, or you can apply one of them at a time as and when it's necessary to fix a certain thing on the file. Okay, so one of the biggest questions we received is, why is my risk assessment not pulling through to 1110? And that is one of the very first fixes we did with the Probe hotfix. So if you performed a year-end close, that information would have been overridden, and it's overridden with a blank value. So what you need to do is run the hotfix. The hotfix will clear the overridden value in the background of Probe, and then you will have document 1110 showing you the correct values within document 1110 in terms of your inherent risk, control risk, and fraud risk at financial statement level. So if you're running into a situation where document 1110 isn't showing the correct information or it's blank, then make sure to run the hotfix in the file before you continue. Then another interesting question we get quite a bit is, why is my Probe documents blank? So most of the time the documents are blank when the document is not relevant for that specific engagement, or you have not yet selected the document to be relevant. So in the freeze, we do have the yellow warnings, and within those yellow warnings, we try to explain to you why something's happening. So if ever you open a Probe document, you don't see any content in the document, first look out for the yellow freeze. The yellow warning will actually then identify for you why the document is blank. So most of the time what we see from the support desk is that the engagement type is not selected. So remember, in document 1020, you need to select whether it's an audit or a review. And then you also need to select whether it's small or large, and if the document is relevant for the engagement or not. So sometimes the work program, if it's not material or it doesn't have assertions, it will not show. Some of the documents, like document 1070, is a review document, it won't show for audit, so the document is not relevant for the engagement. But there's not something wrong within Probe itself. If the document is blank, it's most likely because an answer has not been given. So just make sure you look at those yellow warnings. Then another area we get quite a few questions on is how to activate, register, and license your Probe audit template. So when you log into the community, your licenses would be available there. Make sure that your firm champion, if you don't have a champion, get in contact with your account manager. They would be able to add those licenses for you, or the rights to see those licenses on the community. You then go to log into the community, go to My Licenses. Within My Licenses is a license statement, and then when you install the template, you would be prompted to actually activate the license for Probe Audit. And remember, when you're typing in those licenses to do Probe Audit, IFRS for SME, the IFRS Recognition and Measurement add-on, as well as Probe Audit Premium, so that you have all the content that is included in terms of your Probe Audit Premium Plus license. If you don't enter those licenses, you will not get access to those modules within the product, and everyone now has access as part of your license. Then we have had quite a few questions around, why are my amounts not pulling through to the lead sheets? So we do understand that the lead sheets are new, the numbers are new, and how we group different lead sheets is different. And what we are seeing is, first of all, the accounts are not mapped. So if you do have a balance, and now suddenly you had a balance last year, now the balance is gone, first of all, make sure that you have mapped that account. Sometimes we do unmap accounts as part of the update process, and that's when we had a mapping before, and we've taken that mapping to be a different description, and then we might not want to have those accounts mapped already. Then what we're seeing quite a bit is something called unnamed mapping. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where there's unnamed mapping, that means that you imported a trial balance with mapping numbers that are old. Those accounts that is mapped to unnamed mappings, they need to be unmapped and actually mapped to the correct mapping account. So we sometimes find people from a 2015 or 2016 template, you import your trial balance with mapping numbers because you don't want to go and remap, but then you also import it to mapping numbers that don't exist anymore in the new template. Or sometimes you go from IFRS to SME or SME to IFRS. And then what you need to remember, the mapping numbers are not always the same because IFRS has more mapping numbers than SME. And then you will end up with mapping numbers that don't have a place to fit but then it does form part of the unnamed mappings, and you just need to check those. Then if you're opening a lead sheet, make sure that you take into account the debit versus the credits. So we call it flipping. So if you have an accounts receivable, but it is the wrong debit or credit, then it will flip to amounts payable. And vice versa, the same thing with VAT and tax, which we will look at a bit later. Then it could also be that we did something wrong within the grouping of the accounts. So check the hotfix. We had two issues in terms of the groupings. The first one was deferred tax, which we have fixed. So if you found your deferred tax number missing or not flipping correctly, we have fixed that in a hotfix earlier in March. And then there was also loans to and from group companies, which we fixed within the hotfix. And then lastly, if you're not coming right, please contact support. We can have a look with you to see why are those lead sheets and the amounts not pulling through. So I mentioned quite a few times the importing of mapping. So a quick tip, just when you want to import mapping, and how is the most efficient way to actually bring in an old year's file mapping into the new year. So when you do a file new from existing, our recommendation would be to update your prior year file so that you can get the new mapping imported or the new mapping updated. If there's then any unmapping that we need to do, or we want to change the mapping numbers, we will change those. That then allows you to export the trial balance into Excel, so you can then do that, and then import the trial balance from Excel again. What we've then unmapped will be unmapped, and you can map it in the new template. Or if it is, if we remapped to a new mapping number, it will then have the new number, and then that will stop you from having any of those unnamed mappings. And it is especially true if there is changes to mapping. Definitely never do a copy components from old engagement files. We see some people do a copy components of the trial balance. Please do not do that, because then you import or you copy components, all of the components from the trial balance, including the incorrect mapping numbers. Those old mapping numbers are not accounted for within the new template. The old grouping numbers are not accounted for in the new template. So if you now copy components, the trial balance that is mapped to the old mapping numbers that's still linked to, if we think about PPE, the grouping 2010, that will not be shown on any of the lead sheets. It's not included in any of the probe documents. We don't account for those numbers. So that could be quite risky for you. And then it could also bring in some of those unnamed mappings. So please never copy components from old engagement files, your trial balance mapping or any account information. And then when you do import, we do understand you want to import the mapping and you don't want to remap. But please, if you're importing with old mapping, please try and not do that. Or if you have to do that, please go and review the mapping database to make sure that you don't end up with any unnamed mapping within the database, because those accounts will not be displayed in the financials. It will not be displayed in any of the probe documents, and it will basically not, the whole trial balance won't be complete. So you won't have that. Then a question or still part of why did we change the grouping? Why did we change the lead sheets? So previously, and we link it in with types and volumes of transactions. So previously a section had the account balance and the transactions all grouped together. Sometimes the liability and the asset was grouped together, and sometimes the current and the non-current was grouped together. So a section in probe, the term definition of what is a section in probe has been updated based on the SICA FAQ, that the risk assessment must be done per the significant or clause of transactions, account balance and disclosure. And we have then updated the new document manager to comply with that, so that you have the ability to do a separate risk assessment for each clause of transaction, account balance and disclosure. And that's why we have now moved to, in terms of the grouping and in terms of probe, the grouping where the actual item is being disclosed within the financial statements. So that's why you will now see much more grouping numbers, much more sections within the document manager. And something like depreciation is no longer with PPE, but it's either part of cost of sales or other expenses based on where the depreciation originated from. The same thing with the profit and loss and assets. Employee cost. So where is my employee cost? We used to have a separate work program for employee cost, but employee cost is actually part of operating expenses. So it's not a separate line item on the financial statement, it's part of operating expenses. And what we have done in document 1051, we included operating expenses as a section 750. And there you have the option to select whether employee cost, you actually want to test that. Once you do, in document 1051, in 750, pointing the work program for operating expenses, we'll switch on an area called transactions related, directly related to operating expenses. So almost similar to traps, but not a trap, because it will make use of the same assertions that you've selected for operating expenses to show the procedures. And it will then show there as part of required procedures all of the employee cost part of operating expenses. So we got quite a few questions initially to ask, where's my employee cost procedures? But remember, it does form part of operating expenses, and then part of you have to select in 1051 the employee cost. So that brings us to the concept of traps. So transactions relating to account balance. As an example on the screen, we have document, or not document 305, but 305, which is the new section for property, plant and equipment. And property, plant and equipment, some of the information that used to be in document 2010 now moved. And it's got transactions relating to account balances, which could be cost of sales, your operating gains and losses, your operating expenses, and finance costs. So depending on the selections you make in document 1050 and 1051, as well as the mapping that you have, those traps can then be switched on. Also the assertions that you select, the risk assessment that you make, and we then still bring some of those procedures into document 305, so the transactions that relate to that account balance, to help you with efficiencies within the audit. So while you're looking at property, plant and equipment, you most likely want to also have a look at depreciation. Some of the depreciation could go to cost of sales, some of it to operating expenses, but we then bring some of those procedures back into 305. You can do the procedures there. Make sure you follow the hyperlinks between the 305 work program and then the relevant trapped work programs as well. But that is then how the procedures are split. So we've already spoke about the new document manager, the renamed number and renumbered sections, as well as your new lead sheets. And remember, as part of the new lead sheets, you now also have, you always had it, but the graphs are now more clearer in terms of the movements because we've grouped it together. Now, another area that do come up quite a bit with supporting is tax. So tax used to just be one section, section 50. And if I quickly open Caseware, just as an example, we used to have just section 50, document 5020, 5022, and 5030. So our deferred tax, current tax, and then the actual taxation. So 3 lead sheets with all of the taxation grouped together. Now we actually have 5 lead sheets, and deferred tax is still grouped together with 395.10 deferred tax asset work program and 595.10 deferred tax liability work program. Then we have our 495.10 current tax receivable work program and 695.10 current tax payable work program. And then we have our 5030, which moved to 795.10 taxation work program. So you'll see the 300s is your assets, the 500 is the liability, 400 is your current asset, and 600 is your current payables. 700 is the income statement. So we've grouped them for you in a way that would then make sense, and then we've split those balances into the actual asset and liability, current, non-current, as well as taxation payable. If we quickly have a look at the actual numbers within the template, you will see that the numbers actually stayed the same. It is grouped a bit different. So there we have our deferred tax balance. It's 917. So if we go to the new file and we go to the deferred tax asset, there's nothing. There is no deferred tax asset. If we go to the deferred tax liability, because it's a liability, there we have the number as well. So it's just, you need to keep track of the two. If you did have an asset, the asset will be on the asset side, the liability will be on the liability side. If we go to the current tax receivable, there's no current tax receivable. Current tax payable, there we have that. And within the old file, we will also have the current tax balance, which would be the same balance, 1784 and then 1784. Remember, this one is rolled forward, so it is in the prior year. So the numbers are still the same, and it stayed the same, but it's now just grouped differently. So what you would have noticed within this slide is that tax is, so we first give you the section where tax is it an asset liability, and then it's 9.5. So all of the 9.5s means that it is actually tax. So for those of you that still want your one main lead sheet to be able to go and have a look at what is tax, where's my total tax? I'm struggling, we're getting questions, I'm struggling to figure out where all my taxes are because it's now split between current, non-current, deferred, payables, and then all the others. So what you could do is create a copy of any one of the lead schedules, or create one from scratch, go into the properties, and then change the group number to question mark, question mark, question mark, full stop, and then question mark 95. So that says, give me all of the groupings that you have that ends with a 95. And that means give me everything that relates to tax. So if we then open the all tax lead sheet, there we can see there's my deferred tax liability, there's my normal tax, and there's my current tax payable. And it's all grouped together. It will take into account all of the accounts that you see within the engagement file. So if you're struggling to figure out where did Caseware now go and group my new tax numbers, you don't want to go through all 5 of those documents, create an all tax lead sheet for you, and then go and have a look at where the tax is actually documented or grouped. So that was just an example. Change the last or the second last question mark or number to a question mark, and then you will see in terms of the tip how to create that tax lead sheet for you. And the same thing would count for some of the other areas. If you still want them grouped together, you could go and create those lead sheets for you. So just as a reminder from before, what we see within the engagement files is please do not copy old documents into the new template. Don't go and renumber. We know you loved our old document numbers. You loved your document manager, you might have grouped it in a certain way. If you go and change the Probe document numbers, it will have an effect on how the information is stored. Remember, we use those document numbers to calculate which sections items are in, what groupings they have to use, what risks need to pull through it, your sample sizes, all of those are linked to the document numbers. So the moment you start changing those document numbers, then it becomes very difficult for us to keep track of what's going on. and most likely you won't have documents that comply and pull through the information. If there is a question, please may you go through how to go through the tax lead sheet again. Okay, so let's quickly go through an example again of how to do the tax lead sheet. So I'm just going to go and make a copy of document 695, just as an example. So I'll go Control-C, Control-V. It will make a copy of the document. I will right-click on the document, click on Properties, give it a number. You can choose any number you want. I'll make this one all 2. And then the only value I will change, maybe I should also just give it a name so that I can remember. And then in terms of the group number, depending on which one you copied from, be question mark, question, question, full stop, 695 because I copied 695. You can then just delete the 6 and make that a question mark. So I'm saying I want all the groupies ends with a 95, which means it does have tax, or it is tax related. And I will click on OK. So the moment I do that, there we see it includes all of the grouping numbers. And because it's a question mark, so a lot of you might ask why a question mark. A question mark says anything that fits or in any changeable values. So don't use a 1 or a 2. It means all the values within that range. It doesn't matter what it is. So there we have our tax lead sheet again. Hope that answers the question. So please remember, don't to copy any old versions. Within the existing engagements, please import the data rather. So if you have a last year's engagement file, go to the firm settings and import the data from prior year files. Rather than trying to copy components information into it. With regards to firm templates, remember to update your firm templates if you have any groupings, any connector files, any working papers. Remember that those will have to be updated to work with the new document numbers. And then in terms of a year-end close and update. So it was interesting to see how people interpret a year-end close and the update differently. So our recommendation would be, and we saw quite a few of you first doing an update of the prior year file and then doing a roll forward. Our recommendation would be is that you take the prior year file, then roll forward the prior year file, and then do the update. So please don't update the prior year file first and then do a roll forward. That could create some issues. So our best practice is you take the prior year file, you roll forward the prior year file, and then you update the file. Because that is how you will retain most of the information. You might say to me, but Christian, whether we update first and then roll forward, or whether we roll forward and then update should give the same results. Yes, but there's certain things we do on update to try and retain some of the information for you, and the roll forward does other things that try and read. So we did not cater to keep information on prior when you update on the current year information. So we want you to roll forward first, and then after the roll forward, we want you to update, and that will keep the most information within the engagement file, because that then, in terms of the update process, retains. So we've been going around visiting some of our clients, and one thing that came up is, can I make case view faster? We need to review a lot of documents, and we find that we need to wait 10 seconds for a document to open. Now, although 10 seconds isn't a lot, if you're opening 10 or 20 documents because you want to review them, then it could become time consuming. So I want to point out one feature that is available for you guys, and it's going to depend on how you use case view on which one will work the best for you. So we do have this option to make case view a little bit faster, and it is in Tools Options within a case view document. So important, not Caseware, but case view. So in any one of the Probe document, you go Tools Options, and then in Interface, we have the option for you to enable multiple document windows. So what does that mean? Currently, it is disabled, so you can see every case view document that I've opened in one case view instance, and we have different tabs for the different documents. Now, unfortunately, then, if you're working with two screens, you can't have document 1020 on one screen and 1055 on one screen. You can still have Caseware on one screen and case view on another screen. So if you're working with a document manager and the case view documents on separate screen, you can do that. But if I then tick this, it will then open each one of these documents in its own window. And that essentially takes much more time to do, because every time we are loading Caseware, and then that takes time, and then we're loading the information into case view as well. Where if it's not ticked, we only load case view once, and as you open the documents, Caseware or case view is already open. So think about it when you open Word. When you open a Word document, you first click on Word, you wait a few seconds, Word opens, and then you choose the document you want to open. Same thing with Excel. So this is the same concept. So if you open them with the multiple document windows, every time you open it, we first open the application and then we load the content. But if we don't have it ticked, the application is already open and we just need to open the content. So that's a bit faster. So while you're reviewing, you know you need to open a few documents, go and deselect that. If you want to work on multiple screens, go and select it, and then you can do that as well. Okay. Then we also get a few questions around which Word programs will show and which procedures will show within the Word programs. Now remember, there's quite a few scenarios on which procedures will show within your Word program. And it's going to depend on the answers that you have within your planning documents, such as 1020, 1050, the types of transactions that you selected in 1051, whether you recorded significant risks in 1160, the test of controls recorded in 1150, as well as then in 1160 and 1220, the procedures with relevant assertions or selected assertions. Then we go into the response types that you select on 1220. So do you want to do required procedures, extended procedures, samples, and then lastly, procedures may be manually activated. So we currently know of one big scenario in terms of Forex, where those procedures are not switching on automatically if you selected Forex. We are not doing a hotfix for that one, so please be aware of that one. At this point, we're not planning a hotfix because that would mean we need to update every single Word program, and then you will lose the information that you have entered on the Word program. So when we did the survey, the information was that you don't want to lose that information. So if you do have an entity with Forex, which we now are aware of, please go and manually enable those procedures. And then we're also busy fixing those procedures within the next release. So within the next release, not the hotfix, but the full release coming out later in October, you will then, those will be fixed. So remember that those procedures can always be manually activated. Within the assertions, there's now the 6 assertions within Probe. So we have the completeness assertions, existence and occurrence, rights and obligations, accuracy, valuation and allocation, as well as a brand new assertion cutoff and presentation and disclosure. So make sure that when you're recording the risks, you take into account the new assertions as well, and the procedures are then linked to those assertions. So how do you, in terms of just a quick tip, how do you insert procedures into the Word program? So within any Word program, a brand new feature, you can go and click in the menu on Show, Hidden Procedures. And when you then look at the hidden procedures, you can say, Insert this procedure. So that will then manually insert that procedure. So as I mentioned, as an example, the Forex procedures, you can manually insert those Forex procedures. So that brings us to, before I move on, the end of my presentation, but let's look at the questions. How do you report the bugs or problems, and what is the reporting line? Okay, so the easiest one is to log into the success community, and there is a live chat. So I clicked on Probe Hotfixes, there's a live chat. What we have also done for you is within Probe Help, so within any Probe document, you can actually click on Probe Help and then say chat with support. If I click on chat with support, it will take me to that chat directly, and you'll be able to start a chat with a support consultant. Now, the live chat is only available during working hours, but you can start that chat then. If it is outside of working hours, you can also go to our success community, click on contact support, and then you will be able to get the email to actually get in touch with support. You need to log in first. You'll be able to paste an email, and you can then go through, or you can also contact us on the number, but it's normally easier just to log in and log that case. You get a tracking number, and then you would be able to upload the information that's needed. So easiest way, go to Probe Help, chat with support. If chat is offline because it's outside of working hours, go to the community and an email case. And then, is there a template for some of, just see the questions are coming in hot and fast. So let's have a look. Is there a template for some of the changes? Okay, so I think in terms of the, if you're asking a template for the changes, so the changes, all of the changes was released last year, November, in the 2022-2013 template. And then since then, we've been releasing the hotfixes. So the template is released. You can have a look at those. We are not releasing a new template with the hotfixes included. So the process, if you want to do a firm template, you are welcome to go and create or take the current template that you have, run all the hotfixes on that, repackage that, and send it out, and then the users can use that, or you could just have them all installed the hotfix. So when you run the hotfix, as in when you run the hotfix not only fixes the current engagement file, we also go and fix the template that you actually have installed. So all new engagement files will already have the fix included. So you don't actually have to worry about creating a new template, because just make sure everyone has the latest hotfix installed. If they have that installed, that will then go and update the procedures. How do you insert multiple procedures at once instead of adding one at a time? Unfortunately, you can't. So you would have to go and insert them one at a time, and also make sure if you're inserting a main procedure that you're inserting the subsequent procedures. I know that this could sometimes be a pain point. We've taken note of that. We will have a look at if we can do something, but for now, you will have to insert one at a time. What is the what is the best way to roll out the hotfix to all users? Do we need to do the hotfix for each template per user? So you don't have to. So the best way, I think, to roll out the hotfix to all the users is to send them an email with the actual hotfix. Maybe if you're the firm champion, download the hotfix. The hotfix is small enough. You can include it within the email if your email policies allow, or send them a link and make sure they install it. Now, some of you have IFRS, some of you have SME Afrikaans. You don't need to worry about running it on all three templates. You just run it on the one. It will automatically update the probe components and the probe library for all of them. So you don't need to worry about having to run it 3 times if you own all 3 templates. The Probe components are shared and it's the same between all 3 of those. So we update all 3 of them in the library at the same time. And it's also the same hotfix that work on all of them. So how do you update an old file to the new version? Do you have to create a new file from scratch, import prior year TP, and then remap accounts? No, you definitely do not have to do that. So within the, once you have a prior year file, I already mentioned that the first step that you would do is do a year-end close. So let's say this was last year's file. You would then do a year-end close on this specific file, and that will create then the new file. You then have the option to check for updates. At this point, there won't be any updates available for me, but if you click on the check for updates, it will bring up an update dialog. This update dialog will then show the updates available for you on this engagement file. You can then run that update. That update in this release will take away all of the old documents, bring in all of the new documents, update your mapping, update your grouping. If there is any mapping differences, so let's go to assign mappings. If there's any mapping changes, those mapping changes will then also be applied to the mapping database. If there's any new mapping numbers, we will add those. If we have removed any mapping numbers and there's an account mapped to those will come to the unmapped section, and you then just need to map those to the new section. So there is an update functionality included. Install the new template, do a year-end close on the old engagement file, check for the update, and then you'll be able to run that. Okay, so then we have a question. Did the latest hotfix address the bugs on the audit program, procedures below conclusion, or procedures repeated? So at this point, we did fix some of the procedures within work programs, where for some of the assertions it did not pull through. But I would need a bit more information as to which procedures you are referring to, Alvain. I think if you can send just the support desk an example of those procedures, we are most likely not going to, if it is procedures in an area where you can manually switch on those procedures, we will not be fixing those through hotfix at this point in time. We are only fixing anything that's stopping you from working or where you can't fix it yourself. So for those areas, go into the insert procedures, insert them manually. It will definitely, but please make us aware of the ones in your scenario, and it will then definitely be fixed for the next release. Okay, so that brings us to, I think we've gone through most of the questions, the end of my section. And I'll then hand over to Christine. Thanks, Christine.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to answer some of the frequently asked content questions that relates to ISA 315 revised and the conforming amendments. One of the frequently asked questions that was directed to Adapt IT relates to the new question on 1120, 1125 and 1130. What is the purpose of that question? Do you want to increase the extent of work on relevant and selected assertion as part of your overall responses to address the assessed risk at financial statement level? In ISA 330, there's a requirement that the auditor should design and implement overall responses to address the assessed risk of material misstatement at FS level. In Probe, that would be your control risk, your fraud risk, and your inherent risk at financial statement level. Now, one of the overall responses in the application material of ISA 330 that addresses the assessed risk of material misstatement at FS level is amending the extent of substantive procedure. This is not a compulsory response to the assessed ROM at FS level. The audit team determines that, or when the audit team determines that amending the extent of the substantive procedures is required and appropriate response to the assessed risk of material misstatement at FS level, the audit team will answer yes to that new question. The risk of material misstatement at assertion level will then be increased. If you've assessed your ROM at FS level at medium, the ROM at assertion level will go up 1 level. And when you assess the ROM at FS level as high, the ROM at assertion level will go up with 2 levels. Then on 1220, the audit team, as in the past, will select the audit procedures based on the higher assessed risk of material misstatement at assertion level and the desired audit risk. But let's look at an example. Based on the understanding of the entity and its environment, the auditor will identify or possibly identify risk of material misstatement at FS level. For each inherent risk, control risk, or fraud risk at FS level, the audit team will raise a separate risk, complete a separate risk card, and they will assess those risks separately. So this is a change from the previous market version. Now the auditor will assess each individual risk of material misstatement at FS level separately. Included in the risk mode is a list of possible overall responses that the audit team can select from. And this is based on the application material of ISO 330. The auditor will select the response. They can also capture other audit response using the other provide description field. The detail of this risk will pull through to, in my example, the 1130 document control risk at FS level. The overall control risk at FS level is automated based on the highest assessment of individual risk. I had one risk, but let's say I captured another risk, control risk at FS level, and I assessed that as high. My overall control risk at FS level will then be automated as high. The overall responses that I've selected in my risk mode will pull through to my conclusion, and I will be prompted with regards to further actions that's needed elsewhere in the planning section. I selected professional skepticism in my example as an overall response, and I'm now prompted that I need to document the communication to the engagement team in the planning memorandum, emphasizing the need to maintain professional skepticism. Then the auditor will be prompted to consider whether they want to increase the extent of work, taking into account, firstly, the nature of the risks that has been identified, the overall responses that has already been selected, and the understanding of the entity and its environment. Again, your increase of your substantive procedure is not a compulsory response in terms of ISO 330. It's one of the responses that the auditor can select in response to the assessed risk at financial statement level. When the auditor answers no to the question, then the ROM at assertion level will not increase. So if we go to 1220, you will notice in my example for PPE, the ROM is medium 1. Now, in my example, property, plant and equipment is a material account balance with no relevant assertions. How do I know that? The no IR indicates that there's no relevant assertion, meaning that there's no risk of material misstatement for property, plant and equipment assertions. And in that case, your ROM will be medium 1. When I change my answer to yes, based on my professional judgment, taking into account the nature of the risk, the overall responses, I want to increase the extent of work, then you will notice, using the same example, a material PPE balance with no relevant assertions, you would have noticed that my risk at assertion level increased from medium 1 to medium 2. Whilst on this screen, I just want to point out that in the product, you will notice red text. This is warnings that prompts you as the audit team to take an action to achieve compliance. Now, in accordance with ISA 330, for a material class of transaction, account balance and disclosure without any relevant assertion, the auditor needs to perform the stand-back provision, considering or evaluating whether the initial conclusion that there's no relevant assertion remains appropriate. If they conclude no, there is no relevant assertion, then ISA 330 requires the auditor to select at least one assertion. And that red text is a warning that just reminds you of that. When I select my assertion, you will notice that the red warning is no longer visible. The second question that was directed related to content is, where in Probe do I document significant judgments made related to risk identification and assessment? ISA 315 requires the auditor to document the rationale for significant judgments made related to the identification and the assessment of ROM at FS level, and the identification and assessment of ROM at assertion level, which includes identification of significant risks and risk for which substantive procedures alone cannot provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. I'm going to show it to you in the product, or screenshots from the product. In the case of your ROM at FS level, you can use the ROM considerations field to document your rationale for the identification as well as your rationale for the assessment of the risk at financial statement level. In the case of your risk at assertion level, you complete all the required fields in the risk mode. Two that I want to point out is your description of your risk and then your selection of the inherent risk factors. The template includes the examples of inherent risk factors that we find in ISA 315 revised. Then the other field that can be used to document the rationale for your assessment of the risk of material misstatement at assertion level is the reason field. You can also use the reason and explanation field that you will find per section in 1220. So for each class of transaction, account balance and disclosure in 1220, that's applicable to the engagement, there's a reason explanations field, and you can document your significant judgments in that particular field. For example, you can choose to document your reasoning for selecting a particular assertion for a class of transaction, account balance and disclosure that is material, but for which there is no relevant assertions identified. Another question that was directed by a number of customers is whether the audit team should use 1051 or 1052 to document the evidence relating to analytical procedures performed during planning. Now, firstly, I want to point out that the risk assessment procedures that was previously included in the work programs moved from the work programs to 1051 to assist audit teams with the timiest identification and assessment of ROM at assertion level, and to design the further audit procedures. The analytical procedures that we perform as a risk assessment procedures do not need to be performed in accordance with ISO 520. Now, ISO 520 deals with your substantive analytical procedures and those performed near the end of the audit. The standard that sort of governs the risk assessment procedures or the analytical procedures that forms part of your risk assessment procedures does not include specific requirements. In the application material, you will note that they say that you can do a simple comparison of information, such as comparing your current year balances to your prior period balances. And they also mention, or they also note that the requirements and the application material that we do find in ISO 520 may provide useful guidance. So when we look at 1051, the risk assessment procedures or the analytical procedures that moved from the work programs into 1051 now, those are your simple analytical procedures where you compare the current year balances to the prior year balances and that you obtain explanations. In the case of 1052, some of the requirements or the guidance that we find in ISO 520 relating to your substantive analytical procedures is included, one being the formulation of expectations. So currently, audit teams can execute a choice. They can either perform the analytical procedures in 1051, or they can perform the analytical procedures in 1052. And they can take into account the complexity of the engagement, or perhaps the firm has made a decision which one of the two approaches is preferred. Based on the feedback received by the customers, we acknowledge that including both analytical risk assessment procedures or including it in both 1051 and 1052 can be confusing. So we will revisit that with the 2023 release. Share a tip with you with regards to extended versus core. In the 2022 release, two new profiles were introduced into the product, being core versus extended. The audit team will select between the core and the extended profile in 1020 document. Both core and extended meets the requirements of ISO 315 revised. The content of core will address the minimum requirements or will address the requirements of ISO 315. In the case of extended, additional content, additional questions, additional procedures are added based on the application material. Now you might ask the question, how do you choose between these two profiles? And what you can take into account is the experience level of your engagement team members, and also whether you want to provide your engagement team members with additional content to meet the requirements of the relevant ISOs. We also want to mention that it might be useful for the core user, let's say the more experienced user, to use the extended profile or the extended content in particular cases. For example, if it's a new document in the product, or if it's a new development or a new standard. So let's use the example of 1055. Now 1055 is a new document. And it's the objective of the document is to obtain an understanding of the complexity of the IT environment. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you in the product. So as I mentioned, you will select your profile in 1020. I'm first going to select core, and when I open 1055, there will be procedures or questions that's going to direct the audit team to gain the understanding related to the IT environment. But as I said, this is a new document, so as a core user, I want to read the guidance, read the additional content that's provided to the extended user. And what I can do is I can go back to my 1020 and I change the profile to extended. And when I open 1055, I'm now provided with considerations that will inform me what I can take into account when answering these questions or when obtaining the information related to the IT environment. The considerations, as I mentioned earlier, is based on the application material. I'm also provided with a list of questions related to the IT characteristics. And this is taken, or the content is based on Appendix 5 of ISO 315 revised. Based on these answers, I will be prompted to assess the complexity of the IT environment, and this is also taken from Appendix 5, these categories. And this will inform the extended user to make a decision on whether specialized skills in IT is required to obtain a further understanding of the IT applications. Based on the qualifying, or after answering the qualifying questions, a table will also appear at the bottom of the document, and the user will now be prompted to identify the classes of transactions, the account balances and disclosures to which these IT characteristics are applicable to. So let's use an example. I answered yes to the question that there's highly automated transactions or paperless transactions. I now ask myself the question, to which account balance class of transaction does the highly automated transactions relate to? And I will select, in my example, I'm going to select revenue. I'm going to say revenue has highly automated transactions. Now for the extended user, content will be included now in 1150. 1150 deals with gaining understanding of the information system. So as part of gaining the understanding of the information system related to revenue, I need to get an understanding of the IT environment that's relevant to the flows of revenue transactions. And considerations taken from 1055 are now added to that particular question. You will notice there the highly automated and paperless transactions. So the extended can be used by the core user in certain circumstances. Going back to the slide. Another question that's asked is, can I select assertions on 1220 when I've identified a ROM at assertion level? So let's go back to an example that we've used earlier, the PPE example. PPE is a material class of transactions, initially without any relevant assertions. I, as an auditor, need to do the standback provision. And let's say when I do the standback provision, I identify that there's a risk with regards to the significant estimates of useful lives and residual values, our favorite. So the question is, can I just now tick AVA? And the answer to that question is no. Your relevant assertion should not be recorded on the 1220 document. You need to record a risk using the risk mode. If you select AVA on 1220, certain of the functionalities will not activate in planning, and that will likely lead to non-compliance. One example of that is on 1150, where you obtain the information that's required for significant account balances, classes of transactions, and disclosure. The section will only be activated when a risk is recorded. Just going to take a step back. So in accordance with ISO 315, the audit team is required to obtain an understanding of the information system for all significant classes of transactions, account balance, and disclosure. Significant class of transactions is a class of transaction or account balance for which a risk has been identified, for which there's a relevant assertion. So when you record the risk, using the risk mode for a particular section, in my example, PPE, that section will be activated on 1150, and the audit team will be prompted to document the understanding as required by ISO 315. If you only select AVA for PPE, in my example, on 1220, that section on 1150 will not be activated. Secondly, the risk of material misstatement at assertion level for AVA would not have increased. So going back to the previous slide, if I select AVA, on 1220, my risk at assertion level will not increase from medium 1, for example, to medium 2 or medium 3. I need to raise the risk using the risk card. The input from the risk card for the assessment of the risk at assertion level will pull through to the ROM calculation, and it will increase my ROM at assertion level. And that will get you to the required outcome. Then just to close the loop, another change that was introduced on 1220 relates to the approval of the audit plan and strategy. So the audit engagement partner needs to sign off on the audit plan and strategy. And when they do that, 1220 will be updated, and the assertions will indicate NRS for a material account balance for which there was no relevant assertions. And there's no selected assertions. Thank you so much. I'm just going to check with Christian whether there's any questions that needs to be answered from my side. And he's saying no, there's no questions. So I'm going to just hand back to him, and he will deal with some more questions and just round up the session. Thank you so much for your time.
There's a few questions with regards to risk. So one question came in saying that you guys also have some issues with the risks and the ROM pulling through on 1220, the same as 1110. So those are all part of the same hotfix that fixes the risk of material misstatement pulling through. So if you have a risk of material misstatement not pulling through to anywhere within the file, please go make sure that you run that specific hotfix. Then a question on 1160 with regards to how do you remove a significant risk, as well as how do you develop a procedure for the significant risk. So I'm quickly going to open 1160 and then jump to one of the sections, and then we can have a look. But first of all, how do we record a significant risk? And then from there, how do we delete some? So I'm just going to start with property, plant and equipment. Click on there's no risk being selected. So that's how you would record the first risk for the section. I can double click, provide a description. I'll just copy and paste. Select the sections where it's relevant, inherent risk factors, and then the relevant assertion. So document the likelihood as well as the monetary input. Based on that, we will then bring up a warning or a consideration, not a warning, consideration to ask whether it is a significant risk. If you then indicate that it is, we would then document the specific audit procedure. Someone may ask, how do we document the procedure, you need to be sure that you have indicated that it is a significant risk. So once you indicate that it's a significant risk, you would be able to document the specific audit procedure, and then that procedure will pull through to the work program. I'm going to submit that risk, and it will then generate 1160 to incorporate that risk within the document. Once that risk is then incorporated in the document, we can go ahead and delete risk. Now, it's important to note that not everyone will have access to delete risks or ignore procedures. So if you do not have the ability to insert a procedure, delete a risk, or delete procedures, then make sure you check in with your firm champion on the firm template and your firm settings. So we do have a Probe firm settings document, and within the Probe firm settings document, the firm can decide who is allowed to delete risks and can modify certain areas. So the default is set you need to have Caseware level 6 rights. If you move that up, less people will be able to do that. If you move that down, more people will be able to do that. I'm currently logged in on a Caseware level 9, so 9 is more than 6. I'm able to do what I need to do. So if I then go back, I can right click on the risk and I can then delete the risk. So we also have a question relating to sometimes it does not give you the space. I think, so when we edit the risk, when we're recording the significant risk, we'll just have to, if that happens, please get in contact with us if this space does not come up. Once you've run all the hotfixes, if it doesn't come up, then just let us know. Remember in a document, maybe it might be document specific. Let's go and look as an example, document 1120. There you would not have the to go and record. So let's add a new risk, a specific procedure, because you would then respond with an overall response. So it might be, I'm just thinking out of the box, it could be that we are in different documents, but if it does happen on document 1160 and you do not get prompted when it is a significant risk to actually go and document the specific audit procedure for that significant risk, please get in touch with us so that we can go through that scenario with you and see why that is not happening. Okay, so that's how I then edit, well, record, make a risk significant, edit it, and I can then also delete that specific item. We then also had a question around the audit manual. So some of you are stating that the link to the audit manual is not working. The link to the audit manual will require you to log in. So you will end up with a blank page. Log into the page and only then will you have access to the audit manual. So the audit manual is only available for people that are registered on the community and that do own a Probe audit license. So we need to authenticate you to be able to give you access to that specific document. Okay. So then I see there's another question. I would like to ask a question on document 1051. In the section where we are required to inquire, inspect, and observe, I noted that when we document a section on one component, it populates on the other components. How do we control that? Okay, so that was, I think, almost the second hotfix we released. So please go and have a look at the Probe Hotfix, document 1051. The reference cells in each are not populating, and it is the types and procedures tables are linked. So please go and apply the hotfix for document 1051, and that will then resolve if you're completing for one area, it's completing for the others. So I think that does bring us to all of the questions. If we did not answer a question during the session, we will definitely then reach out to you personally if we maybe skipped one. Okay. So just quickly, what is then coming up for the next version? So we're currently busy working on updating some of the training material, and we will keep you informed as and when we release some of those. So we're doing a brand new how-to document series on how to complete some of the documents, as well as the videos within the documents, and we'll start releasing those in bits as we go along, so starting with planning and then moving through. Then for those of you that's interested in the release itself coming up in September, for our next release, we will be doing a beta session again. You're welcome to, when we send out those emails, register and participate in the beta testing. And then in October, we will be releasing our 2023 version of the template. The 2023 version will include procedures and documents for ISO 220, ISQM2. We're working on those work programs, automation procedures, switching on and off, as well as the fixes that we talked about. And then we're very excited about our Caseware idea, data-informed procedures. So a lot of the procedures that you are performing today, manually, we can perform within Caseware idea, and some of those we will bring to you within the October release, looking at the order to cash cycle to start off with, and automating and providing you with data-informed procedures in that specific area, bringing significant efficiencies to the audit. And then for ISO 600, we know the standard is out, but we do not facilitate early adoption, so it is scoped for 2024. So we'll look at that for next year, but it's not going to be included in the template this year. We've already dealt with all of the questions, I think. If there's any other questions, you're welcome to submit them to us. You should also have my email address. I've sent out the invite. You're welcome to get in contact with me directly if there is any. So with that, thank you very much for attending, and please, if there's anything we can help or assist with, let us know, and then we will respond. Thanks for attending, and I hope you have a good Friday and weekend further.